Okay, in today's video we're going to be replacing a Race Face Aeffect Crankset and replacing the chainring as well. To get started, let me show you the tools you're going to need. So in order to do this project, you're going to need a rubber mallet, 15mm open-ended wrench, crank puller, 8mm Allen key, also a bottom bracket tool for removing the chainring, your new chainring, and if possible, 1/2-inch socket wrench. Alright, to get started here, we're going to want to remove the chain. And you can do this by either removing the rear wheel or by grabbing your derailleur and creating a bunch of slack that will allow you to get the chain up over the chainring. And once the chain's off, you can kind of get it up out of the way. Then we're going to use an 8mm Allen key here to remove this. These things tend to get really tight, and so you might need to use a cheater bar. And then a little cheat that I have here is to use my rubber mallet in here to create kind of a wedge force. And I'm going to push down on this really hard. There we go. Broke free. Remember that you're turning towards the back of the bike, essentially like a back pedal, which is why you need that stopper force to help you out. Try moving that crank bolt. It's a fancy way of doing it by spinning here. And the crank bolt comes out. Now the reason why we're even doing this video is that this is a little bit different than some of the other cranksets that are out there, in that this is not self-extracting. So when you get it, it didn't come off the way that another crankset might. So here you're going to need to either tap it off, pull real hard, or get your crank remover. So I've got the crank remover here. It's a very simple. Screw them in until it's tight. Then we're going to screw the top portion in, and then we're going to use that 15mm wrench. Yours might be a different size to finish this off. Fortunately, mine wasn't very tight. There it came. So now we've got the drive side off. You'll be aware of any spacers that you have. You want to keep track of those and what direction they go on there. And then just give a little tap here. And then we get the non-drive side out. Time to replace the chainring. Okay, now it's time to remove the chainring, and you're going to need a bottom bracket tool, Shimano style, to do this. It fits right in there like this. This is the Race Face cinch system, and it oftentimes takes a lot of force to do that. And so the best way to do it is if you can set your crank arm upright like this, and then that will allow you to torque down on the side here. And this is just a simple righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, so you're going to be turning counterclockwise, and just put a lot of pressure until it breaks free. And then when it breaks free, then you're not too many twists to get it off. And then we can replace the chainring. Before we do that, we'll make sure that we clean this all up. Okay, the new chainring has got an arrow on it, and that is to indicate where the crank arm should sit as you put this on here, like that. Then we take the ring, apply a little bit of a grease to it, and sit it back on here. Tighten that back down. Then we get it hand tight, then we'll finish it here with using that same method. You want it to stand up so you get proper leverage on it. This time going back away from me. Now we're ready to install the crankset with the new chainring back on the bike. So whenever you have your system open in a part like this, you should take time to re-grease it. So I'm just applying a thin layer of grease onto the non-drive side crank arm. Take a rag and make sure you clean up around here. This is a part of your bike that gets dirty that you don't get to very often. So make sure you clean the whole thing up. And when you're greased and ready to go, you take your non-drive side and you just insert it from the back side here and push it through. When you do that, you might need to give it a tap with the rubber mallet just to get it to come all the way through. Okay, these videos often are supposed to show you how to do something simple, but I want to show you that what happened here is when I put the crank arm in, the top cap of the bottom bracket popped off, and it's not supposed to do that. And so that happens. You run into things when you're doing projects where you're like, darn it, I don't know what to do now. And so what essentially needs to happen is that this cap needs to be pushed back in and then the crank arm reinserted, but I'm having a hard time doing that. There it is, the cap sitted now. And when I push the crank arm through, it doesn't want to come. It's like it's just a bit too tight. So I'm trying to figure out how to push the crank arm through and get that top cap to stay put. I'm not having a whole lot of luck doing it. So what I'm going to do is try to hold that cap on there with this bottom bracket tool while I tap from the back side and see if that allows me to put enough pressure to counter the force of it coming in. That did it. I was able to do that there. So sometimes you get in these projects, you gotta kind of think outside the box to get this stuff to work. And then remember, we had some rings that came off of here. Once we get that all back on there the way it's supposed to go, I'm ready to throw my crank arm on there. And then finish it off with the 8mm. Now the thing about these is that, remember how hard it was to get it on. The force required or recommended by the manufacturer is about 40 Newton meters. That's like basically as tight as you can make it. When you get to this point, you can go ahead and put your chain back on. Make sure you get the narrow wide aspect of it correct. And then put your wheel back on. My recommendation is that you put the bike on the ground so that you have the pushback of the ground and can put a proper force on your 8mm wrench here to tighten this down to the spec 40 Newton meters. You don't need a torque wrench to do that. It's basically as tight as you can make it. If you have a torque wrench that goes up to 40 Newton meters, that would be awesome, but I don't. So I just basically tighten it as hard as I can, and that seems to work. It keeps things from cinching up as well as keeps the crank arm from coming off. That is how you remove and replace the Race Face Aeffect crank arm as well as the chain ring.